As it turned out, she sold her body for a promise. When Lisa came home that night, she didn't smell like me. Not even the way she smelled after a normal day at work when I greeted her at the door. The smell was sharp, alien, piercing every cell in my body with a poisonous realization. My wife had traded me for paper bills and empty promises. And the worst part was that I knew with whom. Victor, her boss, with his greasy fingers, always ogling her as if she already belonged to him. I realized now that there was no hint in his gaze. He'd gotten what he wanted a long time ago.
Thank you for watching my channel. I create videos for your enjoyment. Please subscribe if you want to support my efforts. It's very important to me. I apologize in advance for any mistakes. Dubbing is done by neural network. Please point out mistakes in the comments so I can correct them.
Lisa had always been an incredibly beautiful woman. Tall, slender, with long brown hair that cascaded over her shoulders. Her eyes, light green, always seeming mysterious, looked at me as if they knew something more than I did. But now I could see that there was a mystery behind them. And that mystery was that every night when I thought she was coming back to me, she was actually coming back from Victor's bed. We lived together for 5 years, and during that time I learned to read Lisa by her slightest movements. Her gaze, her body movements, the tone of her voice, all of these things used to seem to me a sign that she was happy. I was proud of her career, because she was always striving to become successful, to climb the career ladder. But when she started staying late at work, mentioning more and more how good Victor was treating her, I felt alarmed. Lisa's sister, Lily, had always been a shadow of her older sister. They were inseparable as children, but as they grew older, their paths diverged. Lisa is successful, attractive, always attracting the attention of men. Lily, quieter, more modest, but with the same captivating beauty, although with a touch of melancholy in her gray eyes. But it was this melancholy, this underlying despair that later served as the key to my revenge. It was months ago when Lisa first mentioned the promotion. She talked about it over dinner with such enthusiasm, as if she already knew it was hers. I smiled and cheered her on, because it was important to me that she was happy. But every day it became harder and harder for me not to notice how her phone was filling up with messages, which she quickly hid as soon as I was near. Victor started showing up in our conversations more and more often. He was a good 20 years older than her, a gray-haired man with a haughty expression. I'd once thought it was just a working relationship, but now I felt like he was pulling invisible strings, tying her to him. Lisa came home late one day, tears glistening in her eyes. She said she had been offered a promotion, and all it required was to fulfill some conditions. There was bitterness in her words, but I didn't realize at the time that it was the bitterness of knowing that she had already made her choice. It requires too much, she said without looking me in the eye. What is it? I asked. She was silent, biting her lip, and then slowly walked away into the bedroom without giving me an answer. I didn't realize then that at that very moment she had already made her pact with the devil. As the weeks went by, I began to notice Lisa drifting further and further away from me. She would come home tired, but her fatigue was not physical. It was a mental exhaustion that was reflected in her gaze. I knew something was wrong, but I wasn't ready to admit it yet. Not until I happened to overhear their conversation. I was at home when Lisa's phone rang. She was in the shower and didn't have time to answer it. On the screen, the name Victor popped up. Contrary to my usual behavior, I decided to listen to the message he left. Lisa, you looked great today. I hope you enjoyed your bonus. I expect to see you in my suite tomorrow night. His voice was disgustingly confident, like it was just another business conversation. I felt nauseous and furious at the same time. It was clear, the bonus wasn't just money or a promotion. She had sold her honor and our relationship for it. I slowly sank back into my chair, feeling my world crumble. When Lisa came back into the room, I looked at her as if I was seeing her for the first time. She was saying something without noticing my icy stare. There were 1,000 thoughts swarming in my head, but one was the main one: revenge. I knew what I would do. I wouldn't just sit back and be patient. My revenge would be as low as her betrayal. Lily. She was someone who was always looking for support. With Lisa, they were so close that I knew her sister would be the perfect pawn in my game. We met by chance, or so it seemed to her. Lily was shocked to learn of what her sister had done and didn't hide her anger. I don't believe it. She was always so right, Lily said, her eyes darkening with resentment. Well, she won't be right anymore, I replied quietly, keeping my gaze on her. My revenge began its journey through temptation. Lily was vulnerable, and I was full of rage. Subtle hints, earnest conversations, eyes lingering a little longer than they should. And then one day, when Lisa was working late again, Lily found herself in my arms. She was the one who comforted me, and in that moment I knew that my revenge was nearing completion. Every night when Lisa was late for work or missing on important business, I found myself sinking deeper and deeper into communicating with Lily. At first it was innocent, talking about the past, reminiscing about her childhood with Lisa. She often complained about her lonely life. Her last relationship had ended in failure and she was looking for support. You don't blame her, do you? Lily sat across from me in our house, her eyes searching mine for the answer to the eternal question, what Lisa was doing wrong. I watched her as she moved through her long blonde hair, nervously tousling it with her fingers. She was similar to Lisa, but different, less cocky, more doubt and vulnerability. Her eyes sparkled with sadness and a kind of longing that made her even more appealing. I don't know, I answered honestly, steering the conversation in the right direction. Sometimes I think it's my own fault. Maybe I don't pay enough attention to her. Lily looked up, her face softening. Carl, you're a great husband. Lisa just doesn't know what she's missing if she really she hesitated, as if trying to find the words. I moved closer, almost touching her knees, and said softly but firmly, Lily, you know what she's doing. She's not the same person she used to be. I can see that. Her breathing hitched, and silence hung in the room. I knew in that moment she was feeling what I was feeling, an electric tension that was turning into something more. It was a game on the edge between revenge and temptation. Lisa was becoming more and more distant. It seemed her presence in the house was only physical, her thoughts and soul remained with Victor. She could sit for hours staring at a single point, her phone never left unattended, and her face reflected emptiness. I no longer asked questions about her work or delays. She stopped explaining herself long ago, and I let it go on. Meanwhile, my meetings with Lily became more frequent and, more importantly, more intimate. I could feel her affection for me growing every day. One day, when Lisa left again for another client meeting, I invited Lily to our house. She didn't resist. It seemed that she had been waiting for this invitation for a long time. We sat on the couch, talking about how hard relationships are sometimes, how important it is to be honest with each other. You would never do that, I said, looking directly into her eyes. Like Lisa? She clarified, and her voice trembled. Yes. You wouldn't betray the person you love. Lily lowered her eyes, her cheeks slightly flushed. I slid my hand over her shoulder, slowly bringing her closer to me. Her body tensed, but she didn't pull away. I could feel her breathing getting faster and faster. Carl, I can't, she whispered, but her voice was weak and her body was no longer resisting. I touched her lips with mine, and she responded to me. In that moment, all I felt was rage and a desire to get back at Lisa in the most painful way possible. Every move Lily made reminded me of what I would soon do. Our relationship with Lily went to a new level. She began to come more often, and each time we spent less and less time talking. I studied her body with the same passion I had once studied Lisa, but now there was a darker joy to it. I saw Lily not only as herself, but as an instrument of my revenge. At that time, Lisa was becoming more and more immersed in her affair with Victor. She wasn't just being held back at work anymore. She was going away for weekends under the pretense of work trips. Every time she returned, I noticed her wearing new jewelry, expensive clothes that obviously could not be purchased on her salary. Where did you get that? I asked her one day when she showed up in a new fur coat. It was a gift, from the firm, she replied, trying not to meet my gaze. I didn't ask any more questions. I knew the truth, and that truth was far more disgusting than just cheating. Lisa was selling herself for money, for a promotion, for the lifestyle she'd always dreamed of. And I was an extra in that picture. But I was okay with that. The further away she got, the easier it was for me to continue my relationship with Lily. It wasn't just an affair, it was my revenge for everything she'd done. The day finally came when I decided it was time to come clean. Lisa was once again getting ready to leave on a work trip. Her bags were stacked and she was hurrying to the door. Where are you going again? I asked with cold indifference. On a business trip for a couple days. You know that, she replied, not even looking in my direction. A couple days at Victor's? I said it, looking her straight in the eye. Lisa froze in place. Her face turned pale, her hands clenched nervously. What are you talking about? She tried to pretend, but her voice trembled. You know exactly what I'm talking about. I know everything, Lisa. And Victor knows I'm aware of it, too. She turned to me slowly, her eyes filled with tears, but not from remorse, from fear. Carl, it's not what you think, she began, but I interrupted her. It is exactly what I think. You traded our relationship for dirty money and a chance to move up the ladder a bit. And you think I'm just going to let that go? Lisa stood in front of me like a cornered animal, her face contorted with panic. I was savoring this moment. Lisa swallowed convulsively, her fingers nervously rubbing the strap of her bag. She clearly hadn't expected me to reveal her secrets so easily. Her eyes darted around the room as if she were searching for an escape route, but there was no way out. Carl. It was just one time, she began, taking a step toward me. It doesn't mean anything. I did it for us. For us? I smirked, feeling the hatred building up inside me. You think lying and cheating is for us? You know how hard money is right now. She lowered her gaze, tears streaming down her cheeks. Victor just helped me. He offered me a promotion, and I couldn't refuse. I stepped closer to her, feeling the anger rush in like an avalanche, sweeping away everything in its path. My breathing quickened, and in that moment I wanted to smash everything, to destroy her lies, her pathetic excuses. And you had to sleep with him to do that? I leaned in close to her face, feeling her shiver. Was that the price of your promotion? She was silent, unable to answer. Her eyes full of tears looked at me pleadingly, but I didn't care about her remorse. Every excuse she made only fueled my rage even more. You have no idea how much I despise you, I said quietly, almost a whisper, but my voice was threatening. You think I'm just going to accept that you betrayed me? You think I'll forgive you for that? Lisa rushed to me, wrapping her arms around my shoulders, as if hoping that physical contact might somehow redeem her. Carl, please. It was a mistake, stupid. I love you, only you. I pulled out of her arms, feeling my patience wearing thin.
Do you love me?
I laughed bitterly. Do you think that's what love looks like? You sold yourself for a handout, Lisa. And the worst part of it all is that you still expect me to believe in your love. She stood there shaking with sobs, but I didn't care anymore. This whole farce had gone on too long. Her lies, her betrayal, it was all just the catalyst for my next step. You have no idea what I've done, I said, feeling my every gesture, every word, plunging her into more horror. Your sister, Lily. She didn't just support me. She became my weapon. Her eyes widened, as if she couldn't comprehend what she was hearing. What did you say? Lisa whispered. We slept together, I said harshly, savoring every word. And more than once. And you know what? She was so much better than you. She was something you'd lost a long time ago, honest, sincere, and truly beautiful, not just on the outside, but on the inside. Her face contorted as if I'd hit her. It wasn't just pain now, it was a mixture of disgust, disappointment, and utter shock. No, you couldn't. Lisa choked with bitterness, her hands shaking and her tears flowing even harder. I could, Lisa, I whispered. And I did. You pushed me into it. Your betrayal opened my eyes to everything you are. She lunged at me, as if hoping to fix something, but there was no hope in her eyes anymore. This was the finale. Her world was crumbling right before her eyes. Lisa cried, standing in front of me. Her tears no longer made me feel sorry for her, they only emphasized her weakness. I had once loved her with all my heart, but now I saw in front of me only a shadow of the woman she had once been. I watched her world crumble, and for a moment I felt a strange satisfaction. It was my moment of revenge, and I savored it to the fullest. You ruined everything, she whispered through her tears.
Everything.
I didn't answer. There were no more words left inside me. I had said everything I wanted to say. My heart was empty, no pain, no love, no regret. I knew Lisa could never forgive me, but I didn't need it anymore. She sat down on the couch, covering her face with her hands. Her body shook with sobs, but I just stood there looking at her. We both realized this was the end. There would be no more trust, no more family, no more of those warm moments that once bonded us. Go away, Lisa, I finally said. Leave this house and never come back. She raised her head slowly, her face wet with tears. I could see the despair and pain in her eyes, but I didn't care. This phase of my life was over. Carl, please, her voice was shaking. I said leave, I repeated harshly. I don't need you anymore. Lisa continued to sit, as if she couldn't believe this was happening. Her fingers were tugging at the fabric of her dress. Her eyes were clouded with tears, but it looked like she was still spinning in her head with some pathetic attempt to find an excuse. Carl, she began, as if she hoped that simply saying my name would make a difference. It was a mistake, a stupidity. I know you're angry, but... A mistake? I took a step closer, feeling the rage boiling up inside me again. You call this a mistake? You ruined our marriage for a measly promotion. For a man who means nothing to you. And now you're trying to blame it on a mistake? It's not what you think, she almost whispered, as if she was afraid of her own words.
Victor.
He just suggested it, and He suggested it, and you said yes. Let's call things by their proper names, I interrupted her in a cold tone. You agreed to sell yourself for your career. And now you're trying to convince me that it was stupid. No, Lisa, it wasn't just a mistake, it was a choice. You made your choice. And I made mine. Carl, please, you don't understand. Her voice trailed off. She rose from the couch and took a step toward me, trying to grab my hand, but I stepped back sharply. Don't touch me. I shouted, backing away even further, as if touching her would stain me. You destroyed everything. And the disgusting thing is, you can't even admit it. She froze, clenching her hands into fists. Something that might have been anger or despair flashed in her eyes for the first time, but I didn't care anymore. Her feelings didn't matter anymore. You think you can just throw me away? She suddenly squeezed out. Her voice had hardened, but it was still shaky. After all we've been through together? After all the years we've been together? You're just going to forget about me like that? Forget? I hummed, crossing my arms over my chest. No, I would never forget. I'll remember every betrayal you made, every excuse you gave, every lie you told. You destroyed everything, Lisa. And you know what? I don't even want to try to fix it anymore. She stood in front of me like a broken doll, her shoulders slumped and her face covered with a network of tears. It was obvious that her inner world was crumbling, but instead of eliciting pity, it only elicited satisfaction. I didn't feel an ounce of sympathy for her. Now you know what it's like to be betrayed, I said, giving her one last look of cold contempt. And I'll know what it's like to live without you. I turned and walked out of the room, leaving her standing among the shards of what had once been our family. It had been a few days since I kicked Lisa out of the house. I hadn't returned her calls, ignored her tearful texts, or opened the door when she came over. Everything inside me was scorched to the core, and I didn't want to return to those feelings. But one morning was special. I got a text from Lily. Hey, we need to talk. It's important. I wasn't sure I could talk to Lisa's sister after what had happened between us, but curiosity took over. We agreed to meet at a cafe near my house. I spent the entire day waiting, not knowing what to expect from her. My revenge on Lisa included her sister, and I knew it was cruel. But it was amazing how easily Lily had agreed to it, and I was willing to listen to her to understand how she felt right now. When I walked into the cafe, Lily was already sitting at a table by the window, carelessly flipping through the menu. She looked as perfect as ever, slim figure, smooth blonde hair falling to her shoulders, her blouse emphasizing her slender collarbones. She looked up when she saw me and nodded, inviting me to sit down. Hi, I said, sitting down across from her. What's up? She put the menu down on the table and leaned closer, smiling slightly. I've been thinking about what happened, Lily began, her voice soft, almost a whisper. And you know, I think we might be able to capitalize on it. Profit? I squinted, not sure what she was getting at. Lily, I thought it was just about getting revenge on Lisa. She nodded, but her eyes remained serious. Yes, but now I think we can go further, Carl. Lily leaned back in her chair and ran her fingers along the thin chain around her neck, as if the gesture helped her focus. Her eyes no longer had the naive glint in them that I'd seen before. In front of me sat a woman who clearly knew what she wanted. You say it was revenge, she continued, her voice lower, almost intimate. But I think you realize it was more than that. You and I. We didn't just use each other to get back at Lisa. There's something real between us. Can you feel it? Her words hung in the air, and I couldn't help but ponder them. Was this really all just a fling? Or was Lily right, and had our relationship crossed that line where revenge turns into something deeper? I looked at her, her lips slightly open, as if waiting for an answer. For a moment, I remembered that night, her body in my arms, her muffled moans in the dark. It was too real to be just a tool for revenge. Did you mean it? I raised an eyebrow, trying to read her expression. You and I slept together to get back at Lisa. You suggested it. Or are you saying it was more than that to you? She frowned, her eyes glistening with restrained emotion. Carl, I'm not the kind of woman who does something like that for fun. Yes, at the time I thought it would be fair to my sister. But then I started thinking about the two of us. I know you're mad at Lisa, but you can't deny that there's something between us. I fell silent, trying to gather my thoughts. Of course I was attracted to Lily, and not just because she was physically attractive. In her presence, I felt confident, in control, something I hadn't felt around Lisa in years. But could this connection be something real? Did you think I could just forget everything that had happened? I asked, leaning on the table, looking up at her. Do you really believe we can start something new after what we did? Lily smiled slightly, her gaze warming. I'm not asking you to forget, she whispered. I'm asking you to give something new a chance. We both know that marriage to Lisa is a thing of the past. I'm just suggesting you move forward. With me. She leaned closer, her lips a few centimeters from mine. I could smell her perfume, subtle and alluring, and I admit that moment touched something inside me more than I'd like to admit. Lily, I whispered, touching her arm, you want a fresh start, but what will happen to Lisa? Your sister? You know she's never going to forgive us. She just shrugged as if it didn't matter at all. She made her choice. And now we're making ours. The days went by, and each day I tried to make sense of my feelings. Lisa tried to re-establish contact. She left me messages, asked to see me, begged to talk. But every time I heard her voice or saw her name on the phone screen, anger boiled up inside me. Her cheating with Victor was a poisonous memory that was impossible to erase. She'd betrayed me for career ambition and money, and I wasn't going to forgive her for that. But Lily, she was becoming something more in my life. We met in secret, avoiding prying eyes, and every time I was with her, I felt something new, unfamiliar. It wasn't just revenge, it was more like an attraction, something forbidden that gave me the strength to continue. We spent the night at her apartment when she invited me over for dinner. I remember how she met me on the doorstep in a simple homemade dress, her hair carelessly gathered into a bun, and a slight smile on her face that immediately made my heart beat faster. Come on in, make yourself at home, she said, pushing back slightly to let me in. Lily's apartment was nothing like the one I'd lived in with Lisa. It was much cozier here, not as sterile and cold. The warm light of the lamps made it cozy, and there were soft pillows and plaids scattered on the couch. She offered me a glass of wine, and soon we were sitting on the couch talking about what had happened. We sat on the couch, and the conversation itself turned to the topics I'd been so diligently avoiding for the past few weeks. Lily was unexpectedly subtle in her observations. She didn't rush me or ask me questions head-on, but her understanding of the situation and tactfulness made things easier. I know this is hard for you, Carl, she said quietly, taking a sip of wine. I feel your pain. And I know what it's like when the world falls apart and those you trusted become strangers. Lisa betrayed you, but I'm here for you. And I want you to know that I'm not going away. Her words penetrated deeper than I expected. With each passing minute, I felt more and more that she wasn't just part of Lisa's revenge plan. Lily's gaze was soft, but at the same time there was a spark of determination burning in it that drew me in more than I could admit. With every word she said, I could feel something new forming between us, a connection that wasn't based on lies and deceit, like with Lisa, but on something more real. I thought it was over, I said, looking into her eyes, setting the empty glass down on the table. First with Lisa, and now I don't even know what to think about it all. Everything seems so confusing. Maybe it's not as confusing as you think. She moved closer to me, her hand sliding into mine, and I felt the warmth of her touch. Sometimes we're just afraid to admit what we really want. I don't want to be your temporary revenge, Carl. I want to be something more for you. I looked at her beautiful face, lightly illuminated by the soft light of the lamps. Her hair was loose, a little disheveled, but that made it even more charming. I felt a heaviness in my chest, caused by many days of pain and disappointment. But next to her, on that couch, I felt something new, something that made me believe that life could be different after all that had happened. I didn't answer her with words, but Lily understood me without words. She leaned toward me slowly, her lips touching mine tentatively, as if testing to see if I was ready to accept it. And I did. With every touch, with every breath I took, I felt my anger leave, giving way to another feeling, the desire to be with her, the desire to forget everything that had gone before. Her kiss was deep, slow, and I felt everything inside of me melt under that rush of emotion. Her hand slid down my neck, she pressed closer to me, her breathing faster, her body tensing in anticipation. At that moment I was no longer thinking about revenge, about Lisa, about Victor. Only Luda and I existed, and this moment seemed eternal. Her hands began to leisurely unbutton my shirt, and I let her lead the way, feeling myself sinking more and more into that feeling of intimacy. Her skin was warm and soft, and I greedily absorbed every touch, every kiss, responding to her call with every movement. We ended up on the bed, never pulling away from each other. Lily was far more passionate and outspoken than I could have expected. Her movements were full of desire, and she wasn't shy about showing how much she was attracted to me. We merged into one, losing all sense of time and space. Her every moan, her every breath, was filled with intense sensations that made me dizzy. When it was over, I was lying on my back, breathing heavily, and Lily was nestled next to me, resting her head on my chest. Her hair tickled my skin, but it felt good. We lay in silence, letting the moment stretch out. I didn't know what to say. Everything was so tumultuous that words seemed superfluous. Lily was the first to break the silence, whispering softly, "Everything is going to change now, Carl. You know I'm still married," I said with some irony. "And even if Lisa was wrong, that doesn't make me free." Lily lifted her head and looked at me, her face a mixture of understanding and determination. "I'm not suggesting you drop everything," she said. "I'm just saying that we can be together. We can create something new, something we didn't have before." Her words pierced me. There was something in that sentence that resonated in the back of my mind, but at the same time, something held me back. I couldn't just forget about Lisa, about what had happened. Every time I thought of her, memories of her cheating, of her laughing and leaving to meet Victor, betraying our family. My head was full of thoughts, and I didn't know how to approach it. "Lily," I said, and she pressed herself against me again, wrapping her arms around my waist. "You have no idea how hard this is for me. I want to be with you, but—" She interrupted me, lifting my chin and looking straight into my eyes. "But you don't want to hurt Lisa, do you? It's okay to do that. You've been with her a long time, and I understand it's difficult. But listen, she betrayed you, and you shouldn't feel guilty for finding comfort and joy elsewhere. I want you to know that things are different between us." I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. Yes, she was right. Lisa had betrayed me. She chose career and money, and instead of support, she chose to take up bed with a man who could have promoted her. I hated her for that. But at the same time, a part of me still reached for the memories of our time together, of how it all started. "I'll talk to her tomorrow," I said, pulling away from Lily and looking her in the eye. I needed to break up with her and forget about her forever, like she was nothing. The next morning I met Lisa at our favorite cafe. I chose a quiet corner so no one could hear our conversation. When she walked in, I saw a new side of her. She was the woman who had ruined everything we had. "I'm filing for divorce," I said, trying to speak calmly, but my inner anger couldn't help but erupt. Lisa froze, her eyes widening in surprise, and then a mask of innocence appeared on her face. "You made your choice, and now I have to make mine too." Lisa lowered her head, and I saw her shoulders shake with restrained emotion. In that moment, I realized she was going through pain too, but she didn't deserve my regret. It was her fault. "Lisa," I said, looking her straight in the eyes, "you don't understand what's important right now. What matters is not what happened in the past, but what we did to each other in the present. You chose Victor over me. You chose career and money. How do you think I should react to that?" Lisa looked up, panic and despair in her eyes. I knew she was trying to find words to justify her actions, but all her attempts looked pathetic and pointless. "I thought it would help us," she finally said. "I thought that if I got a promotion, we could live better and have more opportunities. A better life?" I repeated, unable to contain my sarcasm. "Do you really believe that money and success can replace love and trust? You betrayed me, Lisa. You betrayed our family for your ambition." At that moment she fell silent, and I felt the tension in the air rise. I kept looking at her, trying to see if she felt any guilt or regret, but she just seemed to be lost in her thoughts. "I don't know what to say," she finally said, and I could hear the desperation in her voice. "I realize I made a mistake, but I can't believe that everything is so easily ruined. I don't know if you can understand," I said, my patience wearing thin. But I've made a choice too. I won't stay with you, knowing what you've done. I can't. Her eyes filled with tears, and I realized it was something she hadn't expected. She had always thought she could control the situation, and now that I was determined, everything had changed. Carl, please, she said, her voice shaking with emotion. We can fix this. I'm ready to start from scratch. From scratch? I interrupted her, not wanting to hear empty promises. You already got your promotion, but the price you paid was too high. We can't go back in time. I stood up abruptly, feeling the rage building up inside me. I didn't want to hear any more of her excuses, didn't want to see her cry. I knew it was just an act to make me feel sorry for her, and I wasn't going to fall for it. Carl, wait, she shouted, standing up and trying to stop me. I ignored her, heading for the exit of the cafe. Outside the window, the world seemed as indifferent as she was to me. I knew I needed to pull away, to take time to realize what had happened. But at the same time, I felt myself getting more and more caught up in the idea of revenge. Not just revenge on Lisa, but on Victor. They had both betrayed me, and now it was time to act. I wasn't going to let it go without consequences. What was the best way to get back at Lisa's boss? Beat him up? Frame him? Publicize the fact that he forced his female employees to sleep with him for money?